Hi, thanks for joining us and welcome to another discussion with one of our expert partners. Before we get into the main conversation, here are a few sound bites to give you a feel for the topics we touch on. Hope you enjoy it and feel free to suggest other topics that you'd like us to discuss in future videos.
That was the question I wanted to pose. Like, should hotels still rely really on historical data? Is there really further value in it to put a lot of weight on it? Or, I don't know, Thibault, do you think, forward-looking data and let's say on the books and pays data is much more relevant for a revenue manager to come up with solid forecasts?
You two are the revenue professionals here, so Thibault, you can jump in and I'll just listen to what you guys say.
No, but I'm going to give you a very revenue manager answer. Well, it depends.
Exactly, that's what I also said. Yeah.
So my point is more like I do believe in this kind of a blended approach when you look at the historical data, but you look at real-time figures, pace, and future trends, which are, in my opinion, even more relevant than the past one, mostly because past data is not becoming very reliable predictor because of the COVID, because of economic shifts, because of the change on behavior. Today on traveler behavior, it changed quite dramatically. Before they were booking like 6 months in advance or even more. Today they decide to go one day to another to Mexico.
But whatever you're doing in terms of pricing, just as one element next to other elements, obviously, will to some sort of extent also dictate where your forecast can basically land. So pricing directly influences forecast, and it's always running around in that circle, right?
Now that you know your forecast, we change your tactics, and then you will do better than your forecast. It's like knowing the future will make you change the future. Very hard to say, but I'm not sure if you follow me here.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? In a way that doing a forecast will influence your decision based on this forecast. So those kind of AI give us, in my opinion, a door towards a much bigger market and helps the small one do like the big one. Because before, the AI and the RMS were exclusively used into those kind of big corporate hotels. And today, the small hotel next door, they have an RMS and they click on a button and they do some dang pricing. You see what I mean? So I do believe truly that the AI, again, it's just the top of the iceberg. There's a full strategy we see not here, but that's the first entry towards a revenue management and help the small one do like the big gun.
And you have a couple of steps to take from setting up a rate code in the PMS, setting up the corresponding rate code in the channel manager, setting up the corresponding piece in the new channel, and then connect all that sort of stuff with each other. That's a super simple example. This is stuff that in, I don't know, hopefully a couple of months from now, basically no one has to do anymore.
I wish.
Yeah.
I do believe like when you try to differentiate what tactic, what strategy, and the whole revenue manager has evolved, I do believe it used to be at the beginning very, today you still have some people like this, very descriptive. It's more like, here's what happened. And I've seen some revenue meetings going like, oh, we picked up 70K in this month. Well done.
So everyone can read that on the report. Yeah. Thank you for the input.
There you go. So that's more the descriptive revenue management, and that's this kind of revenue management and revenue manager which are disappearing because they only focus on the descriptive element. And I do believe today we are at a tipping point. That's something which I'm very vocal about, where revenue manager needs to even evolve from tactics, that's technology. Strategy, that's good, but the next element is experimentation. That's where we try things. We are more like a scientific hat, and we try to make some assumption, and we try to validate or not our assumption, and we try things.
You mentioned it, right? We have the descriptive, prescriptive, and now what is coming is going to be the predictive management of strategic efforts that we're taking as a revenue manager, right? Because obviously what we want to do is we want to take whatever information we have, like broken down in understandable pieces, sort of, from the systems that we're using, mainly the revenue management system. And we want to see, okay, what are we doing if scenario A, and now that scenario planning comes into play, right? Similar to experimentation. What if we're doing this? Which output will it deliver, right?
So let's pick our first topic. Veit, you highlighted one here, which is the death of traditional forecasting. Should hotels still rely on historical data? So what's behind the question? What made you ask the question?
Yeah, so apparently we had the topic coming up in our team just recently, and while we pride ourselves actually in being very good and very accurate in terms of forecasting, obviously there is numerous occasions on where we also miss out and just are far off the actual result in terms of performance for a hotel. Now, when we looked into how people actually approach the topic of forecasting internally, we found that a large number of our people is obviously relying very heavily still on, let's say, historical data. And I do also believe that's for a good reason, because obviously, day of week patterns, for example, they might not change so dramatically, in a market for a single hotel over the course of years. And so there's a fair element of, looking into historical data. But then I was also wondering, especially with the application of revenue management systems, later on AI, obviously, there's so much more actually to forecasting, which we have been presented with actually from a revenue management system point of view already in terms of the, let's say, different angles it takes and different data sources it can take into account in order to come up with a forecast. So that was the question I wanted to pose. Like, should hotels still rely really on historical data? Is there really further value in it to put a lot of weight on it? Or, I don't know, Thibault, do you think, forward-looking data and, let's say, on the books and pace data is much more relevant for a revenue manager to come up with solid forecasts?
You two are the revenue professionals here, so Thibault, you can jump in and I'll just listen to what you guys say.
No, but I'm going to give you a very revenue manager answer. Well, it depends.
Exactly, that's what I also said. Yeah.
So my point is more like I do believe in this kind of a blended approach when you look at the historical data, but you look at real-time figures, pace, and future trends, which are, in my opinion, even more relevant than the past one, mostly because past data is not becoming very reliable predictor because of the COVID, because of economic shifts, because of the change on behavior. Today on traveler behavior, it changed quite dramatically. Before they were booking like 6 months in advance or even more. Today they decide to go one day to another to Mexico. That's something which past data cannot predict if you only look at past data. Yeah. Having said that, I was looking at this quotation which I found very relevant. History does not repeat itself, but it rhymes. In a way that if you look at the past, you can find some pattern, we can find some seasonality, we can find some similarities. However, it's not the full equation when looking at the forecast. So to answer your question, like is it the death of traditional forecasting? Maybe not, and I do believe it's still quite relevant because you have many hotels which are still relying on very old school data set and systems. So traditional forecasting is still a good start to get into the forecasting, better than not doing any forecast. And now the more advanced one are using AI, are using systems, are using real-time pattern, forward-looking data. So it's a mix of both, in my opinion, which are the most relevant.
So, I mean, not being a revenue professional, so I'd be interested in your thoughts in a minute, right? But it's, I guess for me, listening to what you've just said there, Thibault, and why you positioned the question, Veit, is it's still relevant, but maybe the weighting has changed. So it's whereas before it may have been everything that we did, and then when forward-looking data came in, it was more of a balance. Now, could it be argued that maybe it's 20%? And 80% is the forward-looking. It's about striking that, and I think to your point about what history teaches us, and we're seeing a lot in the world at the moment about how we're looking at what history happened. It's all well and good to look back, but we sometimes look back in a binary sense rather than looking at contextualizing what was going on at the time.
I'm totally with you guys, and my answer to the team was also very similar. I think it also very much depends on like which sort of level of granularity you are, forecasting in or you're looking at basically. Now, I think a very large relevance obviously has also how you are, for example, pacing from your various distribution channels, right? Because they are ultimately the ones obviously bringing the business in for your hotel, right?
Good point.
But instead of only looking at, let's say, economic factors and look at your regular market segmentation, you also need to have that view on where do your guests actually book you with. And if you don't understand that sort of data and you don't really have the glimpse on all that sort of breakdown, which is obviously hard to obtain if you do that on a manual approach and don't rely on a technical or on an AI-driven approach, it's just simply also lots of guesswork still, right?
And does it? Sorry, me saying I'm not the expert here, but I seem to have a view on everything. Does it actually matter on what sort of pricing policy you're adopting? I mean, for instance, if you're just on a static pricing and that's how you've always priced, and it's not shifting much, it's seasonal, you could maybe look at historical and future. But if it's a dynamic based pricing, then obviously, I guess, how is the different? I know that's not a topic we were looking at discussing, but it's kind of we have different pricing strategies, don't we, that we adopt, and does the forecasting and the emphasis we put on historical and future looking have a bearing on the type of pricing strategy that we apply?
Yes and no. Yes and no, in my opinion.
Maybe.
Because, no, it depends. Yeah, correct. No, but it's more about pricing, and the change that you have in your tactics and your strategy will have an impact on the forecast. Now, if you apply the same tactics, the same changes, like if you had a direct pricing in the past and you are still having a direct pricing in the future, then you could look at comparing apples to apples. But then if last year you had a fixed approach and you were not on certain OTAs, and this year you are, of course it will have impact on your forecast. So the forecast is just the top of the iceberg, and you have so much factors playing into account here that will impact your forecast. But now, depending on my forecast, I will change my pricing. I don't think so. But that's more like best practices rather than fully impacting my forecast. So the forecast is a different element, a bit more external in my opinion.
I think your pricing, let's say like this, that's at least the opinion that I have. But whatever you're doing in terms of pricing, just as one element next to other elements, obviously, will to some sort of extent also dictate where your forecast can basically land. So pricing directly influences forecast, and it's always running around in that circle, right? Because I mean, obviously, if you're just as a simple example, if you're trying to test a very aggressive pricing strategy, undercutting your main competitors, obviously you do that with the aim of, let's say, driving more volume, right? Via channel X, Y, Z, which you are then playing out and hope for the best in terms of getting that volume. And that additionally, obviously, has that impact on your actual forecast in the sense of your volume assumption would obviously increase, your rate assumption would probably decrease because you've been aggressive with your new pricing strategy. And I think it's always in that sort of circle.
That's super interesting, because people are saying like, so okay, now that you know your forecast, will change your tactics, and then you will do better than your forecast. It's like knowing the future will make you change the future. Very hard to say, but I'm not sure if you follow me here. You know what I mean? In a way that doing a forecast will influence your decision based on this forecast. And that's what people don't understand, because a forecast is kind of a forecast at a T instant to guide us to see if we continue doing the same as what we do today, that's where we're going to end up. But between now and the end of the forecast, we're going to change. So maybe it will be better, maybe it will be worse.
Thibault, you threw out a topic, which is, okay, will AI level the playing field for small hotels? That was, so we know AI is being spoken about a lot. Let's pick that up. What was your thought process behind the question, and what's your thoughts around it initially?
Yeah. First of all, I'm sure you have seen it across the board, but I'm still every day surprised by the level of knowledge which is out there when it comes to revenue management. For us, we're here talking about AI, about a lot of stuff, but the reality is that 90% or plus of hotels don't even know about revenue management.
Thank you. Very good point.
No, but it's just insane.
It's
Like,
true.
No,
Yeah.
you're right.
a big opportunity for people who know. But here we're talking about very advanced stuff, but the rest of the world have no freaking clue of what we're talking about. And I do believe those kind of AI and those kind of tools which are becoming more and more popular are giving a way to increase awareness of revenue management and increase awareness of there is a whole new world to a lot of different hotels. Like now we have RMS for bed and breakfast, we have RMS for much more advanced for mice and so on. So those kind of AI give us, in my opinion, a door towards a much bigger market and help the small one do like the big one. Because before the AI and the RMS were exclusively used into those kind of big corporate hotels. And today, the small hotel next door, they have an RMS and they click on a button and they do some dynamic pricing. You see what I mean? So I do believe truly that the AI, again, it's just the top of the iceberg. There's a full strategy we see not here, but that's the first entry towards a revenue management and help the small one do like the big gun, in my opinion.
Right.
Yeah. No, I would fully agree. Like it's mind blowing how many hotels are either still running, obviously, without a revenue management system nowadays. I think Thibault, you said it in Berlin, right, at one of the panels. Like it's guessed at almost 90% that are not running on some sort of pricing automation. And then I also do believe the level of knowledge that people actually bring to the table, as far as this topic is concerned, is, still having lots of room for improvement in that regard. Now, whoever as a hotel is using a revenue management system is also already using some sort of AI, right? That's what we also know. But I think what's happening right now with AI and how it really can impact the industry, plus how it specifically impacts revenue management, is becoming very interesting in the sense of the developments around agentic AI, right? Where theoretically, suddenly, people have, let's say, an assistant on the side who can execute different tasks or who can basically break down, let's say, more complex and multi-step workflows into single tasks and work on those tasks simultaneously in order to execute stuff and think for itself, right? I mean, we're not there yet, but I mean, this is what we can expect. And what it does also is it basically democratizes the access to the knowledge and also the execution power we have suddenly within hotels as far as revenue management is concerned, where you could almost say like it makes, a coordinator, a junior revenue manager, maybe even a senior person absolutely redundant, because that piece of knowledge that will moving forward be required in order to, maintain, let's say, a simple AI agent that does XYZ is being very limited. So I think that's going to be having a huge impact on how this whole construct around not only the topic of revenue management itself, but also the support functions around it and all the positions that are currently doing stuff in revenue management are going to be seen in the future. That would be interesting.
That's super interesting. And I do, as you mentioned, I do believe we are this kind of tipping point of a change in the full skill set of a revenue manager, and the junior one or the one less experienced may disappear, and then you will have more expertise, and the one who can communicate, who can influence, will be very, very relevant. One thing we need to be careful with, and I'm going to open the Pandora box here, it's the AI actually lacks, in my opinion, a lot of gut feeling and intention, which an experienced revenue manager have. And now a lot of revenue manager are actually pushing back on intuition, on gut feeling, but I do believe it's still a very, very important element. Again, it depends, and you should have a blended approach, but data, communication, soft skills, and intuition and gut feeling are still very important. But only relying on AI, it's also very dangerous. So that's why I do believe you need to have this kind of a human know-how and expertise alongside with AI and a system to support the full optimization, to have the full picture. That's important.
Yeah.
Well,
I think what.
Go on.
Sorry.
No,
no, I think what's gonna emerge is obviously that sort of overarching AI layer in hotels, because what we're now seeing is obviously we have AI embedded into various, let's say, standalone applications. And there are the first kind of examples where AI is probably helping in the communication between one and the other tool, and basically is able to combine information and then come up with stuff. But on the other hand side, I think it's really going to move towards having that overarching AI layer on top of all systems, basically, breaking down those silos that we have always spoken about, right? And really get some sort of unified data access, plus obviously then being able to come up with the right methods of suggestions and execution power, and that is going to be the big game changer, I think, moving forward. That still requires obviously the skill set of a revenue manager to bring in their curiosity, their storytelling, their narrative building, their also strategy guidance, right? And there will certainly also be things where a revenue manager with a certain skill set and obviously a certain knowledge and experience has a natural, let's say, advantage over whatever the AI does. But that's how the interaction obviously then has to develop between it. And we're going to see that happening via, obviously, in the simplest form, then a chat interface, certainly, but more of that is going to move over to voice, I think. Plus also, it's going to become very interesting if you think about, let's say, all the nitty-gritty tasks that a revenue manager nowadays has really to handle. Let's just say, I don't know, you decide on connecting a new channel, right? And you have a couple of steps to take, from setting up a rate code in the PMS, setting up the corresponding rate code in the channel manager, setting up the corresponding piece in the new channel, and then connect all that sort of stuff with each other. That's a super simple example. This is stuff that in, I don't know, hopefully a couple of months from now, basically no one has to do anymore.
I wish.
Right?
I wish.
Yeah.
I don't know.
A couple of months is obviously very sporty, but
if it has a process and can be automated.
Yeah. But super interesting, and again, I do believe it's super. I mean, I'm getting there. I think we need 2 or 3 hours to discuss this. But, but you see, like, for example, like anyone can ask ChatGPT about what do you think about this situation and what should I do in this situation, and then you will see like ABC and on this kind of thing. So, okay, that's good. Maybe I should do this. But then, if you have an experienced revenue manager who tell you the exact same stuff, but convince you and show you why and so on, you'll be like, that's what I should do. So I don't know if it's the same content, the same text, the same everything, but the way of communicating it, the way of delivering will be completely different. And that's what will change and will move the needle. So the data are here, but the way you present, the way you influence, the way you communicate today is even more important than the content and the strategy itself. That's super interesting.
I mean, we'll come to... This is feeding into a question that I also posed in this that we'll maybe come on to. I think it's lending itself nicely to it. But just to pick up, just to give you my kind of thoughts on that, to me, it feels like there's a potential industry that is going to develop around this that will fundamentally or could fundamentally shift the hotel tech stack as we know it. Because if we have a core data, and we hear people talk about CDPs, customer data platforms, and whether or not I'm talking about the same thing, or you're using a PMS, but just a source of core data that can be interrogated by different agents, then why do you need separate technology solutions when there could be a business mushrooms up that is people developing agents for your specific? So you define what you want, you decide how you want to level the playing field, you talk through your solution, they interpret the solution and develop an agent that will then interrogate your data.
I see.
That's super interesting. It's already happening. It's already happening. Like I was this weekend with some friend of mine from Accenture, Deloitte, McKinsey, and so on, and they told me like they are developing this every day for many companies out there. Not in hotel field, but of course we are the last one to get on board with this kind of stuff. But it's happening everywhere. They create their own database. They have their own ChatGPT, generative AI or agentic AI linked to their own database, and they do everything linked to this database. So definitely that's a big field which should come anytime soon into the hotel industry.
Right.
Yeah, I just wanted to say, like, obviously it's still a bit hard to picture how that will turn out exactly, but like from what you have just been saying, obviously, if you have that, let's say, part of agentic AI looking into, that leveled out set of data, either via CDP or whatever, then it obviously already has a, let's say, a base to make interpretations on. Yeah. But what agentic AI is obviously also about is to be that sort of execution piece, right? Which is something that currently in the space of revenue management, the revenue manager is. And in order to enable that piece of execution via agentic AI, obviously you need to provide somehow the rails to do that, right? Which means you would probably still need a revenue management system. You might also still need maybe not, a channel manager at the end of the day to distribute all of that sort of stuff. And I think with distributing rates, inventory, and availability, plus obviously shooting out prices, you're only covering one aspect basically of the whole side of revenue management, right? And there's so much more to it, especially when we then come over to the, let's say, intersection with marketing and sales and how you can approach people and how you develop go-to-market strategies and so on. And so I really do believe that the current existing systems, obviously, they still have a very large piece of relevance, and they will be the ones used as being the rails for agentic AI to actually execute at the end of the day, for a couple of years from now.
Yeah, like that's a question people ask me as well, saying like, where do you see the future of tech coming up? Like even more fragmented than it is today, or less fragmented? I do believe we are getting closer and closer to a single point of contact for a single AI that will manage everything. That's what you mentioned, and we are getting there. Like it's not about like being more and more connected, having more and more system. I do believe in this kind of integration going forward, where you have one single point, one single form of AI that will help us do everything else at the same time.
Yeah, I think I've always looked at it. I've used the analogy before where I've often I try and compartmentalize or hang theories around practical things to help me understand it. And I've always looked at a hotel like a human body, and kind of the tech stack being the different organs of the body that helps it to work and to function. I've never quite seen the brain yet be replicated, which is seeing interactions, back to our exercising. When we're out, our core temperature starts to change, so the brain is picking that up and telling another system to start doing something to compensate for that. Well, this is where I potentially see AI is going, is that however the data is funneled in to this core source, when something happens, that will flag an event. The AI agents will identify that, and then within parameters recognize something needs to change or adapt towards it, and then the agentic part will then action that, or at least trigger for someone to be aware and say, you need to consider this, something has happened. And I think this seems to get it the closest to that actual responding to a change. And that comes back to that whole forecasting piece as well, and our pricing changing, isn't it? It's like, well, if these things are happening rapidly all the time, and we've got agents are looking at the various data points and they're seeing this happen, and they're going to be adjusting it and telling us we should be adjusting something, whatever that may be, then also it could start to take that action, and you can start to automate and trust in the same way that people are starting to trust more the automated pricing piece and some of the solutions that we have in our partners. I think one thing I just wanted to pick up on then, really taking the whole thing about the forecasting and the roles that we perform and the AI and the leveling the playing field. And you touched on the revenue manager. And one of the questions I wanted to pose was, I hear so many times, people say, oh yeah, well, revenue manager is moving from tactical to strategic. And I'm like, okay, I kind of have an interpretation what that means to me, but I kind of wonder if I'm a hotel and I'm sitting there, I'm thinking, well, can you guys explain how you see the revenue management role how has it changed? How will it change in light of what we maybe been discussing? But how do we define the difference between tactical to strategic? Who wants to take that? Thibault, do you want to?
Yes,
Thibault, yeah.
so first of all, the tactics and strategy are two different concepts. The tactics is much more like a short term, summarized very simple. Tactics is very short term, and strategy is more the long term vision, the direction you are going. Now, I do believe like when you try to differentiate what's tactic, what's strategy, and the whole revenue manager has evolved. I do believe it used to be at the beginning very today you still have some people like this, very descriptive. It's more like here's what happened. And I've seen some revenue meetings going like, oh, we picked up 70K in this month. Well done.
So and then, everyone can read that on the report. Yeah. Thank you for the info.
There you go. So that's more the descriptive revenue management, and that's this kind of revenue management and revenue manager which are disappearing because they only focus on the descriptive element. Then they move to this kind of a prescriptive revenue management, and that's where I believe what is most important, and that's linked to your strategy, because you move from here's what happened to here's what happened, here's what we're going to do. And that's the most important. The strategy is what we're going to do, and that's something which AI and system cannot do yet. Okay, they can tell you what to do, but they won't do it. So that's more to tell you what to do. And I do believe you have the tactics like minimum level of stays, pricing, forecast, report. That today the tactics AI and system can do a better job than us. That's good or bad. I'll let you judge it. And then us human, where we have our gut feeling, we have our influence and so on, we focus on the strategy, on what we can do to make it happen. And I do believe today we are at a tipping point. That's something which I'm very vocal about, where revenue manager needs to even evolve from tactics, that's technology. Strategy, that's good, but the next element is experimentation. That's where we try things. We are more like a scientific hat, and we try to make some assumption, and we try to validate or not our assumption, and we try things, because what has been working for me in Switzerland may not be working for another hotel next door, and not for London or not for Veit and so on. So my point is more for all those kind of, every single hotel need to have the revenue manager fighting for them and trying to learn exactly what is working for them and try new stuff, because forecasts in the past is not relevant anymore, and the trends are changing, and it's up to us to try new things and find what is working, what is not working. I do believe that's the most evolving things in revenue management.
That's interesting. Veit?
Yeah. So you mentioned it, right? We have the descriptive, prescriptive, and now what is coming is going to be the predictive management of strategic efforts that we're taking as a revenue manager, right? Because obviously what we want to do is we want to take whatever information we have, like broken down in understandable pieces, sort of, from the systems that we're using, mainly the revenue management system. And we want to see, okay, what are we doing if scenario A, and now that scenario planning comes into play, right? Similar to experimentation. What if we're doing this? Which output will it deliver, right? What if we would do that? Which output would it then deliver? And then obviously weigh up, like, what's the more, let's say what's the best strategy to take then in that respect, right? And get things on the way. So I think less from this reading and just describing what happened, onto interpreting what we're seeing and building scenarios out of that, with the intent of finding the scenario that delivers the best output. And I think in that alone, I mean, that word strategy didn't really appear, but I think that's somehow part of building a strategy for a hotel.
So, yeah. So in a way, we're going from what happened to what next would be the shift from tactical to strategic. And maybe the next step is to what if, which is more experimental, more scientific in terms of evaluate, if I, trying to simplify it down, into trying to move beyond just this is what we think we should be doing. Because if all the things we've discussed before with technology could be helping us, we have that level of experience, we're becoming more skilled, focusing on the strategic element. but then we want to evolve further. It seems to be that testing, that what if this happens? What if X, Y, and Z? How do we run these experiments? Would that, is that?
Yeah, yes, but I will put some caveat to it, because as we mentioned, many hotels don't even know about revenue management. They don't even know about, they don't do anything about revenue management, let's put it this way. So starting with the tactics first is the first layer to go into revenue management before moving from not doing anything to experimental. That would be that's a recipe for chaos. You need to have this kind of a stage where you go from tactics. Yes, I'm changing my rate every day. Well done. Minimum level of stays. You have like your reporting right. You have the clean data. First step. Then second step, you go into the tech. Maybe you may have some AI for your RMS and so on. Then you automate the tactics, so you can move a bit more into the strategic element. Then you look at taking your decision on data. You look at what you can do on the strategic element. You can do on the holistic risk management for total revenue. Then you can you can go into experimentation. But I do believe, that's why I put some caveat. Don't go from tactic to experimental from day two. You need to go step by step, because if not, create more confusion.
I think the general question was, what is going on? How are we moving? And I think what you've articulated is where it's moving. I guess where I look at it, because this comes back to my background years ago as a headhunter, and I still look now, and you still see job descriptions. And job descriptions still look like the big, you've got new hotels opening, and their organogram looks the same as a new hotel like 5-10 years ago. Job descriptions look the same.
Manage rates and availability.
How many of them talk about technology in there and utilizing technology? Some do, some don't. And I kind of feel that there's this, it feels sometimes a bit like an echo chamber. There's a group of people that sit in and talk and see these things going on, and these discussions are happening. And then you come out of that and look at the actual hotel industry and you see job descriptions. I mean, how are universities? How are hotel schools? How are they adapting? Are they teaching? Have their curriculum changed to be adapt? Otherwise, all we're going to do is we're going to get the same people coming out taught in the same way to do the same thing. And my bigger concern is, are they even going to be interested when they're weighing up what they want to study and what industry they're going to go into? Do they want to go into an industry when they say, what kind of tech do you use? And they're like, huh? It's none. It's like, I don't know. And that's why I wanted to pose the question. You guys are in it, but you guys have evolved because you already took that step out, and you're in that consultancy side of the business, which works as well as providing the tactical and strategic, but you're also looking at that forward thinking, what's coming next, what's evolving. And I don't know, I just worry a little bit that actually is this evolving.
It's super interesting. Like the fundamentals needs to change. The fundamentals need to change. The education needs to change, and it start to change. Some schools start to embrace technology, or to embrace to bring not only very good pedagogue, people who have been in the education for a while, but as well people with experience to share the stories. Okay, the content may not be as educative as anything else, but at least they tell it from the ground. They have been on the ground, and they saw what was happening. So I see this movement a bit shifting, but then I do believe it's I don't know, it's a big rabbit hole if we go this way, because we need to make one of the biggest issue I see, and that's why I'm a bit scared, and we need to make the job of revenue manager much more sexy than before, because people, they don't want to be revenue manager anymore. Before, it used to be very sexy, very attractive, but people, I see less and less people going into this direction, and that's a shame, because it's very fun. I find it fun. I have a lot of fun in revenue management.
Yeah, me too.
No, it's true. And
when I say that out loud,
I find it fun talking to revenue managers.
But we need to make it fun. We need to make it understandable and simple. People try to make a lot of things which are very complex and so on, with a lot of theories, while revenue management is very simple, very fun. We try things, we communicate. That's very fun. But we need to communicate this way, that it could be a good path. And then another layer, which I'm also very scared. Okay, the talent is one, but then you have good revenue manager who are now leaving the industry because they are burnout, they are too stressed, and so on. Because the revenue manager is the first layer of between the ownership and the hotel. And if shit's the fan, the revenue manager is the first layer. So we need to educate, and we need to build the next generation of revenue manager, which are much more resistant to stress and are having fun going up to work and having fun, just explain and fight for the hotel to make better. But I do believe that's for me, that's the biggest element where we need to be careful, because it's evolving and we are losing a lot of talent, and we need to make the job even more sexy than it is right now, and much more attractive for the next generation.
But I think it's a super hard question for us to answer, really. Like, I mean, what we all agree on is that we somehow need to redefine and redefine that role in itself according to up-to-date standards. Basically, that has to play in with whatever education is being provided, basically, for young leaders coming into that field, and also how their skill set can be obviously enriched, not only with what they need to know from a purely fact perspective, but also from a perspective of, if we're staying with the topic of experimentation, right? There's different experimentation concepts out there. If that is something where we say, okay, revenue management from a strategic point of view requires you to be present in the field of experimentation, how would you expect that from someone who has never heard a thing about what an experiment is and how you actually run it, right? So there's various things. And I think, in all fairness, I think universities and also employers, they are moving, right? And we know that stuff is not going from one day to the next, but let's say from what I have been observing here from afar, at least on the German side of all things, is that lots of universities at least introduce revenue management courses where you get a simple, let's say, glimpse into what it is all about and what is being required to actually perform in, that field. Is it sexy? No, certainly not, as it is right now. But it can be. But I think there were the wrong ones actually to open up that bubble.
Maybe, but I don't know. I wonder if the businesses like you guys, is that the solution? Not the solution to the problem. That's the wrong way of phrasing it. But if 90% of hotels don't see the value of revenue management, then I'm not being honest, they're going to be hard to sell the job of why it would be fun to be a revenue manager. Yeah. But if they sat down and had a 15-minute conversation with either of you guys, or you guys were talking at a hotel school, and not within the curriculum, but just what it's like to be a revenue manager, if you really wanted to be a revenue manager, I would kind of imagine that there would be a few that would be engaged, motivated, maybe even inspired to think. And so I wonder whether, consultancies with the right, maybe the issue comes down, as I think a lot of it does, it comes down to leadership. Where do we see the leadership within the industry of the people who can make this exciting?
I'm laughing because, like, if anyone listen to us and say, like, I don't want to be a revenue manager, they're all losing their hair, actually.
That's back to the stress point.
So it's like, no,
that's
not
the name
for
of
me.
the show.
Exactly.
Yeah, no, maybe you're right there. Maybe we're not the best examples. But I think it's not because you're here, but I mean, I've known you guys now for a number of years. You're always thinking, not as revenue managers, but as what you bring to the businesses that you work with, what you can do with the skills that revenue management to me is a fascinating role to be in. You are at the heart, working with sales and marketing, you're at the heart of the commercial activity of a hotel. I just don't get why it isn't one of the key areas people want to be part of. And I just wonder. I mean, maybe it's something we need to revisit and bring some other people in from some different some different perspectives to talk on
No,
this
very,
maybe.
What's important is like there's this, okay, it's not a wrong or right misconception, but people say, okay, revenue manager, revenue. So RevPAR increase, RevPAR decrease. RevPAR increasing, revenue manager is doing a good job. RevPAR decrease, revenue manager is doing a bad job. But it's not that simple. And I do believe there is a lot of qualitative data that are very hard to track, such as a good revenue manager will ask the right question at the right time, which will trigger some new ideas, which will trigger some new efficiency, productive ideas, and so on, which you cannot quantify, but still revenue manager is still relevant for this kind of position. So I like to say a good revenue manager is not someone who are going to make magic by plus 15, 20, 300% RevPAR increase. However, if there is any opportunity in the market, the good revenue manager will be here to capture it. So it's more to see as an insurance. But there's this big misconception out there that people are fully like revenue manager will drive revenue, which is true and wrong at the same time. There's a lot of different factors. But that's also why so much stress is, and why we're all losing our hair, is output to the revenue managers, because people believe that they only look at quantitative data to judge the job of a revenue manager, while you have a lot of things which are qualitative and that you cannot quantify, but they are still very relevant.
Yeah.
Veit?
No, I agree. I think maybe a first step obviously would also be to just change the name. I think, Trevor, we had a session last year or the year before actually on how that role of the revenue manager was evolving as well. Back then with a bit of a different circumstance, but also there we said like maybe the title would also have to change, because the title is still such a huge reflector of what people imagine under that role, sort of. And if it is already misleading, or you can just in your imagination say, if I hear revenue, then it's this and it's only this, right? Which in essence is not really true, because there's so much more to it. So we should probably find a better fitting title for that role.
I like you still have the revenue part, revenue alchemist. Like
Alchemist.
Revenue alchemist. That comes
now
to your
scientific
bit.
yeah.
Right.
Alchemist.
I'm almost thinking on that note, that's probably the appropriate point to end our chat today. As a revenue alchemist, we'll leave that one hanging out there. I'll have to think of a thumbnail for this video that encapsulates that.
Amazing.
Okay, well, look, great. Guys, thank you. We've touched on some points. We've got a number of others. We want to try and make this a regular thing that we're doing, hopefully to those people that have been listening and watching. Firstly, hopefully it's been fun. Secondly, it's been of interest, so you'll come back and watch again. But thirdly, if there's any comments or thoughts or topics that you want three ball guys to talk about, that we can talk about, obviously, then obviously share with us. But thanks so much, Veit. Thanks, Thibault. Really appreciate it. Well, thank you for watching, and I hope the conversation was of interest. Please do feel free to suggest any topics that you would like discussed in future videos. We're always open to suggestions. And if you missed any of our previous discussions, here is a link to our last video. Here is a link to our Expert Insights playlist. And here is the button so you can subscribe. Thank you once more, and I hope you'll join us again in the future. Goodbye for now.